What's up, everyone? Today I want to share with you two entrepreneurial lessons that may help you if you're one of those people who want to start their own company, start their own business, and do things in the world. The first lesson is about validating a product. It's very important to start validating a product and seeing if a certain idea or process is worth something, worth, you know, people paying money for. And really you have to figure out if this is something that they would actually pay money for rather than something that they say they will pay money for but they never actually get around to, or when you actually confront them, or I wouldn't say confront's the right word, but you talk to them and you ask them, hey, it's time to pay now, will you pay? And they don't pay. Well, that's a huge problem. So you really have to figure out, will they actually pay for this? And one thing is that you have to get a hard yes. So sometimes you have to go around and you have to ask people, and you really have to get a hard yes. Anything else is a no. If they say, oh, I would love for this, but I can't pay now, maybe in 6 months, that's a no. Unless you get a hard yes where they will pay you, sometimes these yeses may just be them BSing you. And validating a product or idea or service is very important because a lot of entrepreneurs have literally spent tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars of their own money or other people's money building something, and then they end up finding that no one's bothered to even buy this. So, you have to roll out some prototype and be smart enough to do some testing before you go ham with all this money you're being spent. So that alone could have saved you tons of money, millions of dollars. And believe me, that's actually true. There's plenty of companies like this. Kissmetrics was a company that had $1 million plus in funding, and they didn't do this, and it cost them $1 million because they rolled it out finally, realized no one wants this. No one was willing to pay for it, and it was this whole mess. Basically, what Kissmetrics is, it was like this social media data analysis tool where, it would show data about certain, analytics about social media. Turns out it was a complete waste, and there's, hundreds, if not thousands of stories of this happening on multiple scales. The second piece of advice that I want to give you for free is you want to make sure also that you are smart with your money. And here's the key concept. When you have easy money, you spend that money easier. So people who get millions of dollars easily from investors or people who fund them to create this big bang company, oftentimes, not always, but often, because they got it so easily, or because it's not their money, they ended up spending it very frivolously or stupidly. They're much easier to part with it. They'll spend, they'll be like, oh, why don't we buy 10 $1,000 couches because the comfort level added to the employees will help them. Half the time maybe they don't even say that. They're just buying these couches to buy the couches because they think they have all this money, even if it's not their money. So when you make easy money, it's oftentimes easier spent. And this is a huge, huge issue, and it leads to a lot of huge problems. This is why a lot of people who have very little money, or they don't have the most money, but they're very conservative with what they have, they are very smart, and they're very, very efficient with their decisions and what they spend money on. And more so than that, sometimes if you get the right, top performers, in addition to all this, they will be very creative and innovative with their lack of money and do all these ridiculously amazing things because they don't have money to create their end products in some way or shape that doesn't involve a lot of money. I mean, there's so many examples in business, but I would like to use examples on YouTube. I've seen a lot of successful YouTubers who have pretty much embodied this because, you know, they didn't have high production staff, high equipment. They did what they could, and then they were very creative, whether it was in terms of, you know, using what they had, like extensive editing, or using specific equipment, or just coming up with this new idea that doesn't require a lot of money to do. Like they will literally go to crazy places and film it, or do ridiculous stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money to do, but most people would not do, whether it's, you know, drinking hot sauce, or going to some very dangerous place in the world and filming that, or interviewing people and doing a lot of ballsy stuff to get views. You know, the point is though, these people were spurred by creativity. And so the point of that whole thing is that efficiency, or, you know, lack of money, or, you know, conserving money and bootstrapping can oftentimes lead to much more efficient spending of money. Optimally, ideally, you want, you know, the best of both worlds. You want to have enough money to do what you want to do, but you also want to spend every cent of it as efficiently as possible. Now, that's a very tough balance to get right, because, you know, some people, they are too stingy with their money and they don't spend a dime, and they never get anywhere because, you know, what would accelerate them, they don't use because they don't want to spend a cent. And then there's the people who are just a little bit too frivolous with what they spend on, and it depletes them of a lot of cash, and most of it's used inefficiently, and it yields close to nothing. So I find that dynamic very, very interesting, and it's one of those weird things in life where your disadvantages could actually be advantages. And this happens a lot with a lot of poor students and poor kids who really didn't have a lot of money growing up, and because of that, they were able to really, you know, take that and turn it into something incredible. And had they had money growing up, it wouldn't have been the same, because they wouldn't have that motivation, that drive, that need. They would have taken it for granted. They would have looked at money differently. They wouldn't have valued it once they finally achieved it and used it and spent it efficiently. So it's a weird paradox of not having to have. So I think that's very important. And if you're ever an entrepreneur or business person who ends up getting a lot of venture funding, that's something to look at. And, you know, even if you're not in like a startup phase, it's very important. And, you know, Warren Buffett, he's probably one of the best business people in history of all time. And this is one of the things, you know, he talks about a lot. In his biography, The Snowball, you know, there's many moments in that biography, as well as, you know, just in a lot of interviews I've watched, where he tells these stories about how he just, you know, immediately knew that this company was not worth investing in because they were spending so frivolously. Like, if you walk into a company spending all this money on the most ridiculous stuff, like $10,000 for a plant to, you know, sit next to your desk, like, that is just very clearly inefficient. It's not going to help you get more customers. It's not really adding much value in terms of, you know, employee satisfaction, really. You might think it is, but it's really just excessive spending. So you get the idea. Those are the things you have to start looking out for, whether in a business or outside of that. So keep all these things in mind, and hopefully they were of use. Again, this is just my personal opinion, subject to change. It could be completely wrong, so take it with a grain of salt. See you in my next video. Peace.